Hey guys, James here, and today I just wanted to make a quick video on Back 4 Blood, the upcoming co-op zombie survival shooter which follows in the footsteps of Left 4 Dead. The game is developed by Turtle Rock Studios, who worked with Valve on Left 4 Dead, so naturally the game has a lot of hype building around it, and early impressions from a lot of influencers have generally been positive. However, after playing the open beta this past weekend, for me personally, I'm not sure it really lives up to the hype as of yet. But before I get too far into it, let me preface with this. 1, this is just my opinion. If you're enjoying Back 4 Blood, I have no issue with that at all. In fact, I don't think it's a bad game, but I do think there's some clear issues with the game in its current state. And 2, this is only the beta, and my opinion is based on less than 10 hours of gameplay, so there might actually be things which I didn't fully understand or are changed by the time the game actually comes out. Now let's dive into this. For those who don't know, in Back 4 Blood, you play as a group of 4 different survivors in this game called Cleaners, and you fight your way through hordes of undead, called the Ridden. You make your way from objective to objective and work together to survive. Alright, so right off the bat, let's talk about the gunplay. In my opinion, I thought the gunplay felt pretty great for the most part. I like the impact of the guns, and killing zombies always felt satisfying. A lot of guns were really awesome, but I did find some which I felt didn't feel quite as good. I think part of this is that I feel like the sound effects for some of the guns need some work. Some guns can almost feel like you're shooting a toy, and I think improving the sound design would help give the guns that extra oomph. Something to note as well is that using a controller in the game can feel a bit clunky. I usually play with a mouse and keyboard, but gave it a try after my friend on PS5 said to try it out. I think the auto aim is really strong, but it seems to snap on hard to the chest, so unless you're really on point and aiming a little bit high, getting headshots isn't always the easiest to do, which for a game like this is kind of important. I like how they keep the clip sizes and overall ammo you have relatively low. I found that it really helped to keep you on your toes and made you really have to be smart with conserving your resources, which in my opinion just made for a more fun experience. They also limit you quite a bit in terms of stamina, where running, meleeing, and doing certain actions might cost stamina. I actually didn't mind the stamina system, but I do think maybe it could use some tweaking with some of the stamina costs of some of the actions. They clearly took some inspiration from a lot of the battle royale shooters nowadays, allowing you to find and add different attachments to improve your gun in different ways. Overall, I like the system, but I do feel like the UI for it isn't great. I found it kind of difficult to figure out exactly what I had on and to manage the different parts. Like outside of replacing an attachment, is there any way for me to remove it? Guns, even those with the same model, will also have their own unique stats, so in some ways the whole looting system is reminiscent of looter shooters like Borderlands. They also add an interesting system to the game with the card system. In Back 4 Blood, you can build decks of cards that you draw from at the start of every section. These cards can give you different bonuses, and in effect, you can essentially craft different character builds based on how you like to play. I actually think it's a pretty cool system, but some of the cards are just kind of boring, especially early on before you unlock some of the more useful cards. You kind of just end up choosing from a list of really generic ones. Like in Left 4 Dead, here you can play as different characters. Personally, I felt like the characters were kinda whatever, although to be completely honest, it wasn't really one of my focuses when I was playing the game, as usually I was more focused on communicating with my teammates. They seem sort of generic, which honestly is understandable for a zombie apocalypse type game, but I didn't think they were more interesting than any of the characters in Left 4 Dead. One of the most annoying things though was the friendly fire voice lines. Anytime there was a bit of friendly fire, you'd undoubtedly hear about it from the characters, and it can just be really annoying to have to hear it over and over again.
You bloody shot me!
Sorry! Gotta pay more attention to where I point this thing!
The friendly fire was also particularly annoying because they give you a hit indicator telling you the direction of the damage, which makes you think it was a zombie, but surprise surprise, it really was just your friend or the idiot AI. Speaking of idiot AI, one of the biggest issues with the game in my opinion is the bot AI. Sometimes the bots are actually not bad, and I even had a bot which killed more enemies than some human players, but a lot of the time, they can just be kinda stupid. They don't always know how to fight or help out in situations, they don't know how to heal themselves, and overall, I think the AI is one of the biggest areas for improvement. Next, let's talk about the enemies. In addition to the generic horde, there are 3 overarching families of special enemies, each with 3 subtypes. While I did like the enemy designs and the models, I did find that it was hard to distinguish between the enemy subtypes within a class. It was pretty much impossible to differentiate between them because all the enemies in one class share the same model and maybe even sound effects, and as such, the only way I could tell between them was when they attacked me or from the subtitles on my screen. It just feels kinda lazy they wouldn't give some small distinctions, and honestly, I didn't even realize there were different subtypes until I read about them. Again, here I had issues with the sound design where I felt like generic zombies were maybe a little bit too loud, and the special zombies were not always prominent enough and didn't really scare you like Left 4 Dead. Overall, I think the level design is decent, maybe a bit too linear, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for a game like this. I like the different environments, but at times, I did feel like they felt like things you've seen many times in other games already. I also thought for the levels that I played, they do give a decent variety of objectives, so I did feel like the stages felt fairly unique from one another. I think this ultimately brings me to one of my biggest gripes with the game. Personally, I just felt like the game was too derivative of Left 4 Dead. It's supposed to be a sequel, so I get it, but I can't help but feel like the enemies are all things we've seen before, and the levels are all things we've played through before. You have the tunnel level, the fog level, and it really feels like this game is just following the same tropes that Left 4 Dead established and playing on nostalgia rather than feeling like an evolution. I'm sure there will be a lot more in the full release, but still, I think it's slightly worrying. Real quick, I'll also talk about the PvP mode. I actually did think it was a pretty interesting take on PvP where you have 2 teams of up to 4 players who alternate between the zombies and humans. The humans need to stock up, set up defenses, and try and survive as many waves of enemies as possible. The zombie team, on the other hand, can play as special zombie types and spawn in with the generic AI horde to try and overwhelm the humans. The winner of each round goes to the team which survived the longest, and it's a best of 3. I think it's an interesting concept, but I still think it needs some ironing out. Maybe if the games were a bit bigger, expanding beyond 4v4, it might actually make things more intense. I was also honestly surprised they didn't have a classic infected mode where one guy starts off infected, and you try and eventually convert all players into zombies. There were also just a ton of technical issues which happened during the beta. I know there were a lot more players than they likely expected, and part of the beta is just testing these things out, but the game was literally unplayable at times. Inviting people to your group sometimes wouldn't work, creating campaigns sometimes wouldn't work. I had a bot get stuck on turrets with no way to fix it, and we had to restart the campaign as a result. The final level of the beta is unplayable as well. We tried to run it multiple times, but each time we did, no zombies would spawn in, and it was just anticlimactic considering some of the previous levels were actually pretty good. In the end, it just kind of left a bad taste in our mouth. Also, I don't know if this was intended or a bug, but when I had a full group of 4, for whatever reason, it still tried to search for players, and it took a couple of minutes before creating our game. Some of this really seems like it needs to be worked out and shouldn't be happening 2 months before a game's release. Overall though, I actually think Back 4 Blood is not a bad game. In fact, I think it lays some solid groundwork for a game that could be decent, but ultimately, I'm just not sure you can justify the $60 price tag when the game at this point essentially feels like a watered down version of Left 4 Dead. Especially when you consider the fact that you can get Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2 for $10 or less, I think this game is definitely not worth it. In my opinion, the base price of the game shouldn't be more than $40, and even then, I would probably wait for it to be $20 or less before I pulled the trigger personally. But hey, that's just me. Did you try the Back 4 Blood beta, and what'd you think? Do you think it lives up to Left 4 Dead? And of course, if you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel as it helps motivate me to make more and better videos. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.